Well, I haven't been in serious trouble with the media for 3 days, I think, so it's probably time to do something.
That's University of Toronto psychology professor Jordan Peterson.
University of Toronto professor Jordan Peterson has become a phenomenon. That's not an overstatement.
Jordan Peterson has built his entire brand out of acting like some weirdo on social media as of late. But this weekend, he really did push the shtick a little too far.
I received that information.
In a time of polarizing politics, Dr. Jordan Peterson refuses to be pigeonholed.
You're not going to decide what words I'm going to use.
He sums up precisely what is wrong with the modern, moderate Liberal Party these days.
I expected the attention around me to dissipate 3 or 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason, it doesn't stop. And I can't figure it out, really. I think maybe it's because the media types, I mean, some of them have supported me, don't get me wrong, but they can't really figure me out because what I'm doing isn't really political. It's psychological, and I am a clinical psychologist. I've been writing these books to help people. There's other reasons as well. They have to make everything political, and I don't quite fit that mold, and so I don't think they know what to do with me, and I don't know what to say about it exactly. It's stressful. What I've seen among the critical reviewers in the mainstream is a pronounced tendency to denigrate explicitly or implicitly the population that they think I'm serving or that they feel constitutes my readers, and that might be the primary demographic, but it's way broader than that. So it's simply not true. But even if it was true, it's like, well, why in the world would there's something reprehensible about providing useful information to that particular group? You know, that's partly why the darkness is so attractive, is because that's a place where anger can find its home. But I would say, and that's better than naivety, I believe, but it's not as good as integration. And so that anger should be put to work as a disciplinary motivation applied to yourself. It's a powerful force, and it can serve you instead of you serving it. And that would be much, much better. Well, the media is a more complicated thing, I think, because I think what's happening in the mainstream media is that it's falling apart as a consequence of technological transformation. And as it's doing so, it's polarizing. You know, like, well, look, newspapers are having a hard time making any money, right? We all know that. And of course, cable TV networks are losing all their viewers to things like YouTube, fault of people like you. And so they're starting to disintegrate. Well, when you start to disintegrate, you get more desperate. And when you get more desperate, well, then you have to attract attention however you can. And I think what we're seeing in the mainstream media is increasing focus on polarizing figures, because that drives the remaining audience to view. And so I think a lot of that's being driven by the underlying technological transformations.
So media solving for views rather than the truth, that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about the media yourself when you think about the media?
Well, I have mixed feelings about it. I mean, I've been treated very well by some journalists. You know, there's a handful of Canadian journalists in particular. I actually think they're the best journalists in Canada. And I hope that isn't mere personal bias, who've taken a careful look at what I've been doing and saying and have been very supportive of me. The Post Media Group in Canada, it's an aggregation of 200 newspapers, came out publicly in support of my stance on free speech a year and a half ago. And at some cost to them, because it was very contentious at that point. So that's been good. And of course, the media, so to speak, has also enabled me to bring what I know or purport to know to a very broad audience. And so that's a very positive thing. I've had very, very stressful interactions with many, many journalists. It's certainly been the most stressful part of my life over the last 2 years. And some of it was absolutely reprehensible. Some of the journalists, MSNBC News, appalling and amateurish. So both at the same time is a bad combination. People who interviewed me and then chopped up the interview to make it look as bad as they possibly could. And that was all laid out by other people on YouTube who spliced back the original interviews and, put out what I actually
CNN.
said.
What do you think about CNN?
CNN I've had absolutely no contact with personally.
Ever?
I don't pay attention to them.
Fox.
The Fox people have treated me very well. Well, I've pointed out quite clearly why they're factually incorrect and ideologically possessed. I'm not a fan of radical leftists. Look at what happened in the 20th century with radical leftist ideology. It's obvious that things can go too far on the right and they can go too far on the left. And it's kind of easy to put a box around people who go too far on the right. But it's not so easy to put a box around people who go too far on the left. So it's hard for people who are left-leaning, say, and concerned with inequality and that sort of thing, to dissociate themselves from those who have clearly gone too far. And the problem is we really don't know where the red flags are in leftist territory. Now, for me, it's equality of outcome is a good, so-called equity. That's a red flag. So it's harder for people on the left to dissociate themselves from the people who would do everyone in, essentially. But I think it's equality of outcome that's the real pathological desire. That's a bad one.